$1 billion protocol with customer support only run through Telegram.
So every protocol? I mean, nothing wrong with that. I would say that's improved.
Review.
A politician launching a meme coin.
That's a good one.
A meme coin whale trying to pass off as an accredited investor.
They could be an accredited investor. My official title when I first started was actually head of vibes. Our offsites do have a trend of being pretty active. Our last offsite, we went to Zion, we went hiking, we went biking, we did UTV riding, helicopter tours.
People who are quite into fitness or maybe were athletes in their past life actually end up doing really well at work as well. I think it's that intensity translates.
All of us live in regulated markets, right? And so Tanya, you're in Europe, Khushi and I are both in the United States. These are regulated markets. We should be building policy-based infrastructure. So how can you as an organization, when you're building a financial product that operates on a blockchain, that operates in a regulated market, how do you enforce your different, specifically your compliance requirements before those transactions actually get executed?
Are you seeing a difference in conversations, say even last year to now, just because there's more talk about institutional adoption? Has there been a change there?
I would say absolutely. Now sometimes we talk to organizations and they say things like, 4 months ago, if you asked us this question, we would say we didn't need this. Now we do.
I do want to do a really fun segment into the show, which I created for this episode, and it's called the Compliance Core. I'm going to give you guys situations, and you have to tell me if these situations from a compliance perspective approved, blocked, or would need review. A politician launching a meme coin.
That's a good one.
$1 billion protocol with customer support only run through Telegram.
So every protocol? I mean, nothing wrong with that. I would say that's improved.
Review.
A meme coin whale trying to pass off as an accredited investor.
They could be an accredited investor. I would say as long as they are an accredited investor, that's fine. So probably needs review or approved.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we'd love to start off with a little bit of an introduction about both of you.
Khushi, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. I'm Khushi. I lead business development at Predicate. I've been with the team for 2.5 years. Before Predicate, I used to work in venture capital at a firm called Geometry. We focus mostly on applied cryptography investments in the blockchain space. So we did a lot of ZK, MPC, FHE, every acronym you can think of. And then before that, I used to work at a company called C14, which was an on-ramping company. And we focused on fiat to crypto flows. And we were a small company, started as an engineer, and then transitioned to their head of strategy.
I love it. And Nikhil?
Yeah, so I'm co-founder and CEO of Predicate. We started Predicate in fall of 2023. Before Predicate, I was head of strategy and innovation at the Celo Foundation, where we built the Celo blockchain, helped migrate it from an L1 to an L2, led a lot of the major launches on Celo, including things like Circle USDC, Uniswap, Opera MiniPay, among other things. And then, before that, I worked in digital asset policy. And then before that, I started my career in economic consulting in the litigation space on securities and antitrust. And then I also spent time in management consulting at BCG, Reddit, public sector, private equity, and pricing strategy.
Wow, very interesting background. I think both of you have such a unique background. Before kind of diving a little bit more into what you guys are building at Predicate, I'd love to learn more about how you guys work together. What is Predicate as an office space like? The one thing I do know about you guys is that your company is very fitness focused. So can we talk a little bit more about that? Why?
Yes.
Why are you guys doing hiking and hyrox challenges as your team offsite?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start first with actually how Khushi joined the team. That might be useful context. So at the time, it was just me and my co-founder, and we had 1 or 2 engineers. And then I knew Khushi just separately before through crypto world. And then she had reached out. She was still a student at the time, and she had reached out saying she was looking for a part-time internship or something on the business side. And we weren't looking for anyone. And we were like, all right, why don't we? I was like, are you interested in working with us? I was like, we're still trying to figure it out and all of those things. And then Khushi very graciously decided to spend some time working with us at the time. and it was great because a lot of it was stuff that we kind of figured out. Khushi and I realized that we actually approach problems in a weirdly similar way, sometimes concerningly weird. But yeah, so that was really how Khushi first joined, and then yeah, afterwards she then joined us full time, which was really really awesome. But Khushi was the first person on our business team, and then eventually moved to New York. I was also not in New York at the time, but then she moved to New York, and then I moved to New York very recently. So now we're mostly in person. And then I'll let Khushi talk about the office vibe, hyrox, which she's kind of seems to be leading the charge on. And then yeah, somehow our company now is like one that spends a lot of time on fitness.
Yeah, this was definitely a transition that happened at some point in the company and no one realized it was happening. But like Nikhil mentioned, I started at the company a while ago, started part-time. My official title when I first started was actually head of vibes. So we used to have like games every Friday. We would play poker. There's this egg game that we play. I don't even remember the name of it, but it's like a first-person shooter game with eggs, and it's like something you would get in the 90s. It's an old school game. So we play that. We play a lot of Switch, which we did on our offsite, and a lot of Smash. So that's a lot of fun. But our offsites do have a trend of being pretty active. Our last offsite, we went to Zion, we went hiking, we went biking, we did UTV riding, helicopter tours. Before that, we went to Argentina for DevCon, and we went horseback riding. We did a bunch of other activities. And then before that, we had a ski trip in Whistler. So our offsites are generally more on the active side, just because our team loves to be active. 3 of us right now are training for hyrox. So we've got 3 folks in the office. We have a hyrox Slack channel where we put in our training, and anytime we hit the gym or go for a run or something like that. And then our office is filled with 0-calorie drinks, either sodas, protein shakes, or energy drinks. Each person has their own preference. I'm on the energy drink side. Like, I need a coffee in the morning and then 200 milligrams in the afternoon, and then I go to the gym. So it's very important for my routine. And then we also have a bunch of like super healthy snacks, protein bars, stuff like that. So we just have a very fit team. And then we also have a few folks that are incredibly longevity focused, how to build healthy habits for a long life.
Okay, I love that. I think this is right up my alley. But so now is it a prerequisite for joining the Predicate team? Are you just not a culture fit if you are not focused on fitness?
Absolutely not. I think people love to join, and even if they weren't like very active people before or even into fitness, I think it's like a cool opportunity to learn from others as well. Like, I think when I joined this company, I was not as active or healthy as I am now, but I learn a lot from the people around me. So I would not consider it a prerequisite by any means.
Okay.
Yeah, there was that one time, and it's also evolved. Like I remember there was once a point where we did kind of more of a business on site, but it was really just me and Khushi in New York. And then there was like engineering had an on site, which they did in California because a few engineers were in West Coast at the time. And then our on site was they like ended up working primarily and going to restaurants. I think Khushi and I went to a bunch of different workout classes. Like we went to Soul Cycle, we went to Rumble, and then that was basically consisted of our on-site minus the outside of the work part. So
Yeah.
it
Nikhil
has
did get
also
me very into Soul Cycle. That was a change. I had never done a Soul Cycle class before I joined this company, and then Nikhil got me into that.
Interesting. I mean, to be fair, you guys are based in New York, and I think New York has one of the most fun work. I remember I went to this one, which was they used to play house music while you're working out, and then they used to get like DJs and stuff. It was so much fun.
That sounds like berries for sure. It's very aggressive.
It was a lot of fun, honestly. So yeah, but I think overall I do think that, or what I've observed is usually people who are quite like into fitness or maybe were athletes in their past life actually end up doing really well at work as well. I think it's that intensity kind of translates. And so, yeah, I think it's an overall good thing. But I think moving aside from all of the fitness stuff, we'd love to learn more about what you guys are building at Predicate now as well.
yeah,
Let Nikhil take that.
cool. So our hypothesis really started, this was in 2023, that and I don't think this was a unique view, but it was that, of course, I think like blockchains, for it to really become successful, have to function as a global financial settlement system. Like all the time, all the money, all the energy that we put in, it only really materializes if, we shift legacy financial systems over into blockchain-based systems. And there's a whole host of benefits on that, right? Like I won't go into it, but that was really the view. And so if that's the case, we said, okay, great. If the financial system moves onto a blockchain, onto different blockchains, then that also means that financial activity is going to originate from regulated financial organizations and by users that operate in regulated markets. Basically, financial activity today involves the movement of capital in regulated manners. All of us live in regulated markets, right? And so, like, Tanya, you're in Europe, Khushi and I are both in the United States. Like, these are regulated markets. And so that would mean that you need to have those regulations. You need to be able to operate in those regulated worlds, right, on blockchains. And so if that's the case, we then said, okay, great. So how do we actually build the systems for that? Because at the time, we're like, that is not possible at all. We really aren't ready to onboard capital at large scale. We aren't ready to onboard real users into real financial activity. And so for there, that's when we started working on Predicate, which was really the genesis and the real view was that we should be building policy-based infrastructure. So how can you as an organization, when you're building a financial product that operates on a blockchain, that operates in a regulated market, how do you enforce your specifically your compliance requirements before those transactions actually get executed? And the great part of blockchain programmability is actually you can do it better than how it's currently done in existing financial systems because of that programmability. And so, yeah, that's really what we're building is on-chain policy and on-chain compliance infrastructure. And it manifests in very different types of use cases, but that's the core thesis, that we should be able to offload all of that work off of an organization that really shouldn't be spending the time doing it because it's not a core part of their business. A core part of any business is distribution and usage. They shouldn't be spending all the time in the world building compliance infrastructure. Like that should be done by someone else. And that's where we come in.
Interesting. So I think the one thing is, anytime someone in crypto uses the word compliance, suddenly everyone's like, oh, compliance is so anti-crypto. How do you guys kind of battle that? Because, say you go to a founder and you're like, this is what we're building. And they're like, compliance? No. Like, crypto is not meant for compliance. How do you kind of go to them and then try to convince them and be like, no, actually, this is something you guys need?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think there are absolutely systems in this space that should continue to remain permissionless and open, right? When we first started working on this company and figuring out how to build out the appropriate software systems that allow us to integrate compliance into blockchain systems, it was a question of what layer of the stack we wanted to do it at, right? Should we do it at the interface level, at the smart contract level, at the protocol level, the sequencer level? There's so many different ways we could have built this technology. But the reason why we chose to do it at the smart contract level is because smart contracts are usually owned by organizations or applications. And those organizations and applications can be opinionated about how they want to set up permissioning systems, not set up permissioning systems. It's entirely up to them. But you can build permissioning systems on top of open and permissionless protocols. So I really do think that in crypto, there are going to be two flows of capital. There's a flow of capital that's completely open and permissionless, and anyone can access it. But then there's also a flow of capital that is more regulated, more permissioned. And that is necessary if we want to onboard regulated markets, if we want to onboard fintechs and financial institutions, because it's just a part of what compliance requirements they have as an organization. And so I don't think we should cut out permissionless systems entirely, but we should still have the technology that allows us to build more permissioned systems.
Yeah, and adding to that as well, I think compliance is highly nuanced, right? It's actually not a single thing. And I think it's like, if you look back in like 2021, 2022, there were some organizations that were like, oh, we're going to build compliance for crypto. But really what they built was they just said it's KYC systems. It's actually incorrect because KYC is not necessarily required for every type of financial activity. It's a whole spectrum, right? So compliance is also, I don't want funds coming in from this major exploit. We literally just saw that happen with, Kelp as well as Drift, of organizations actually don't want to, and organizations and ecosystems actually don't want stolen funds from North Korea going through their system, right? It's like, You stole tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars from other people we know. We actually don't want to, we don't want to accept this money, right? And so you see that part. And then, you have the other end of the spectrum that you're a group that's doing a tokenized security, and you have to do KYC, KYB investor accreditation, because that is the real regulatory requirement if you're going to have a security. So there is a full spectrum to it. And I think that's the important part, is in the same way that capital flows today in the real world, there is an entire spectrum that you have to navigate around. And that was what we were thinking, is that it shouldn't just be a cut and dry single thing. It's rather, it evolves and it changes, and it depends specifically on what you're doing, where you live, what market you're operating in, what type of product you're building, all of those things.
Actually, that's another question I have, because right now the way crypto works is it's pretty global. So, and different regulated markets have different regulations. How do you solve for that? Say I'm in Singapore versus in the US, there would be difference in regulations. So, do you have to geofence, or how does it work?
It really just depends on what those requirements are, and what that organization needs. But for our system, it's highly programmable. And so it really just comes down to, if you're in Singapore and you're like, all right, cool, we're doing something that can only be used by Singaporeans, there are ways to geofence. But it could be that, oh, it's not just for Singaporeans, it's for anyone who is an accredited investor per Singapore requirements. And so you can also gate it that way. Or you can say, look, like, it's actually more meant to be an open system. We only need to ensure that stolen funds coming in tied to North Korea, to terrorist financing from Iran, all of those things, we need to block those. You can also do that. So it's really, again, it just depends on the specific organization and what they need. We largely remain, we're agnostic to it. We simply make sure that whatever those requirements are can be powered.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think especially now with institutions coming in as well, I think for the mainstream, or for crypto to kind of go mainstream, uh, you know, compliance, regulatory infrastructure, everything needs to be very clear. But is there anything in particular, I think in this year we've seen that we're going through this phase of like institutionalization of crypto. But do you think, is there anything in particular that people misunderstand about what that actually means, that you guys see clearly?
I would say one thing that I've noticed is that people have been saying that institutions are coming for years. And it is true, right? Institutions are interested in crypto. They're building projects, companies, organizations in crypto and working with crypto companies, which is very exciting to see. But I think it's important to note that these time horizons are still long, right? Like institutions take a long time to embed something as a part of their flows. Like Nikhil mentioned at the beginning, if we see blockchains as the financial settlement system for all global money movement, that's a big goal. And so that's not going to happen in 1 year or 5 years. It'll take decades for that to become the reality of the world. So this is not something that we're just building for the short term, something that we think will realize in a couple of years. It's something that will last for decades. And that goes into how we build this company, how we build these products as well, where we want to build things that last. Because if we want this technology to exist and be something that financial institutions use, it needs to be stuff that lasts, right? We can't have a short-term mindset like we have had for the last 10 years. It needs to be more of a long-term mindset.
And are you seeing a difference in conversations, say, even last year to now, just because there's more talk about institutional adoption? So when you were talking to people last year about what you guys are building, and they were like, yeah, maybe. And now everyone's like, okay, yeah, I think this is something we need. Has there been a change there?
I would say absolutely. We when we first started the company, there were plenty of people that thought that this wouldn't be a requirement, that it doesn't even make sense to have any kind of permissioning or policy system for crypto. A year in, people were like, oh, this is important. This makes sense. That's around when people started talking about Genius, for example. They're like, okay, so maybe policy enforcement will be necessary. Now, sometimes we talk to organizations and they say things like, 4 months ago, if you asked us this question, we would say we didn't need this. Now we do, because they've been talking about it for weeks. And so we've seen an evolution where we will talk to an organization. They'll say policy enforcement's not necessary. It's not something they need for that technology. We're like, okay, cool. Makes sense. 6 months later, they're like, hey, so we actually really need this. That's just a natural evolution because requirements are constantly changing, right? We operate in a gray area. We don't know what is or is not going to be the rules and regulation of different countries and jurisdictions. And so as those are figured out, we see more and more interest in programmable policy solutions. And the reason why it is so programmable is because, again, we don't know what it's going to look like yet. And as that becomes more and more clear, we can build the systems and the policies that allow us to implement those regulations and laws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when we started in 2023, when we first started ideating on Predicate, I mean, this was like, I mean, it's a bear market now, but it was also a bear market then. But there was a bear market with no institutional interest either, right? Like no institutional interest, no fintech interest either. And so I remember when we were fundraising at the time, the big question that we would get from investors is like, why should there be any form of permissions? Like that was the biggest question of whether, whether an investor would even offer a term sheet or not. Was like a number of them would say that there is no way that this is permissionless. Everything has to be fully open, whether that is the blockchain level or that is the application level, right? And we were trying to draw the nuance of there are permissionless blockchains like Ethereum and Solana. Then there are permissionless protocols like Uniswap, but then the whole way that this works is that you have to build financial products on top of Uniswap, on top of Morpho, on top of Aave. And that nuance was like one that didn't really make sense in 2023, but has obviously changed significantly.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Is there any particular type of projects or companies that are now kind of scrambling and looking for this that you guys have observed in the last few months?
I would say there's a few that we've seen a lot of demand from. The organizations in crypto that see the most need for something like policy enforcement is typically asset issuers specific to
Mm-hmm.
stablecoins and real world assets, especially as regulation comes in for these assets, as we see these assets being used for money laundering, from exploits. There's more and more of a need for asset level compliance. And so
Mm-hmm.
that has been a really big interest as of late. And then outside of those, we also see a lot of interest from privacy projects in the space. In order to scale any kind of privacy project in crypto, you need compliance systems in place. And then the second would be DeFi. So DeFi is still ongoing. We're still figuring out exactly where policy enforcement fits there. But like Nikhil mentioned, there's open and permissionless DeFi, and then there's financial products built on top. And people are trying to build financial products on top of open and permissionless protocols that service financial institutions and fintechs. Those products typically need some level of policy enforcement. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of interest as well.
And how about with like AI agents now? Because, for a lot of, say, for asset issuers, and say now that they create their own AI agents, is there a way for you guys to also, be able to use your solution for that, or would it have to be, on their end in-house kind of a thing?
Yeah. Our solution can definitely be used for AI agents. It's a very broad and general purpose policy enforcement system. It's not something we've been actively doing yet, and I think it's because the AI agent space is also still very nascent. They're still figuring out what these agents are going to be used for, where adoption is going to come from. But I don't doubt that there is going to be policy enforcement needed for AI agents and guardrails in place that allow these AI agents to operate securely within some predetermined confines. And so it absolutely can be used, just not something we've been doing yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and our read has been the market's not quite there yet on AI agents for real payment activity. You have a lot of testing, and of course, we use AI agents for like making our workday more seamless. We use different things for that. But when it comes to actual like real financial volume and transactions happening, like those are not yet heavily done via AI agents, and that's really the only reason. But I know folks like Stripe have talked about this quite a bit as it relates to tempo and where they see the world going on finance. But it's one that hasn't materialized yet.
Yeah, no, I think even for me, that's something that I'm very curious to see as I think this year progresses, just because, everyone's been talking about how AI agents are going to be used for microtransactions and things like that. But at the same time, I worked on that problem all of last year, so I was at Kite AI. But at the same time, despite me having worked on that problem, I don't think in this moment I would trust my AI agent to make any kind of transactions for me. So, I think there's still some time before AI agents, people actually start using them, let alone trusting them with their money. So yeah, but I think it would be interesting to see how that evolves, and then on top of that, how policy kind of comes in and shapes the our new reality in a way. And so from when you guys started to now, there's obviously been a huge evolution in terms of policy, in terms of how the industry has evolved. What are like some of the biggest changes that you've seen, just in terms of even like being permissionless? What is like the one thing or two things that really stand out to you, and how the industry has evolved and where you guys fit in from that perspective?
I can take this one, or I can start on this one. I think the biggest change particularly over the last year, has been regulation, right, in the United States. So there was, if you look in 2023, crypto complete bear market. The only places that were really kind of more open to development of crypto was Singapore, and then Europe with Mika, right? Those are the two hubs, and then the Middle East was trying to understand exactly where they should slot in. So particularly Vara in Dubai, and then Abu Dhabi with ADGM. Vara was also making a ton of like Vara and ADGM were saying, okay, cool, we can have asset issuers kind of exist here and issue their asset, and that happened kind of more so in 2024. The shift now has been actually that a lot of the regulation is happening out of the United States. The big one first was the Genius Stablecoin Act. So that started creating a framework of saying, okay, cool, stablecoins can actually now be issued out of the United States. So stablecoin issuers are not sitting there in different markets outside of the United States. Instead, they do it in the United States. That basically kind of undercut, in my mind, I think that basically undercut Mika in Europe. And most of the activity that was happening in Europe now shifted over to the United States. On top of that, then in the United States, you had market structure. So that's the Clarity Act that's right now going through Congress. That's another one of, again, market structure regulation that allows for development in the United States. When that happens, what that means then is you're onshoring from a US perspective, you're onshoring crypto back in the United States. You're bringing that back into regulated markets, right? And you're allowing for frameworks and structures so that, oh, crypto is not sitting in a silo, but rather, oh, this can intersect and interact with traditional payment systems, with established fintechs, with financial institutions and asset managers. That opens up the market significantly, because now if you're an organization who's building any type of crypto-based product, you're not just building for a crypto audience anymore. You start looking a lot like a traditional fintech at the end of the day, except you're on the back end or using digital assets. That, I think, has been probably the biggest change in terms of the go-to-market approach, what companies are thinking about, what problems they have to solve for, who their target base is, what are the things that they have to actually build when it comes to their product.
No, absolutely. I think the administration change and regulatory changes in the US have obviously been a huge contributor to how the industry is evolving, and I think how it'll continue to evolve. And I think it would also be very interesting to see, if and when there's another administration change, how that changes as well, because I think these things are so fluid. Like I remember there was a time when, like you mentioned, Singapore was the hub for crypto, just because the MAS and the Singapore government was so pro crypto, and then they got burned a few times. I think now they're very not anti crypto, but I think they're protecting retail from crypto. They're promoting it at an institutional level. So yeah, I think those that makes a lot of sense. And Kushi, for you, have you observed any big kind of changes from the time when you joined Predicate to now? How the industry has evolved, and especially in relation to how you guys or what you guys are working on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Nikhil absolutely killed it on the regulatory side of things. He's our resident policy expert, so he knows everything happening all over the world all the time. But I would say from a market standpoint as well, I think we've seen a big consolidation in the crypto industry. In 2023, when we first started the company, there were a lot of things going on. There were a lot of people in the industry. I think we've definitely seen a lot of companies over the course of the last few years shut down. We've seen talent go to other industries. And so the industry itself feels a lot smaller than it used to be, but it also feels a lot more focused on specific problems, on specific use cases, and we're starting to see actual adoption and usage outside of pure speculation. And so that's been really promising because it's one of those things where sometimes the market isn't necessarily doing well, right? Prices aren't up, but the industry is doing well. And that cognitive dissonance has been something we've really had to navigate over the last 6 to 12 months almost, where it feels like things are going well. It feels like institutions are coming in, they're adopting these assets, but token prices necessarily aren't going up. And so I think that dissonance led to a lot of people leaving, it led to a consolidation, and it led to people who are building companies to last. And so that has been really exciting. And it's been really promising as well in terms of the companies that we work with. All of them are companies that want to continue to exist for the next 10, 20, 50 years.
No, absolutely. I think, especially I was just at ECC and I saw, how small the crowd was compared to even last year where, there were so many people. So I definitely think, a lot of people have left. The industry is getting consolidated, which is a net positive in the long run, even though right now it might not seem like it, or there's a lot of uncertainty around where this is going, or if AI is actually the next big thing and crypto is just gonna probably, I don't know what's gonna happen to it. But no, I think
I'll still take more talent. I'm not opposed to more people coming back, but it is nice to see that everyone who's here is here for the long.
for sure, yeah. So yeah, very fascinating, and it was really nice to get both of your perspectives on what you guys are building, where you see the market kind of heading. But I do want to do a really fun kind of segment, or introduce a really fun segment into the show, which I created for this episode, and it's called the Compliance Court, where I'm going to give you guys situations. So it's a rapid fire. You don't have to give explanations, but if you want to, you can. So I'm going to give you guys situations, and you have to tell me if these situations, from a compliance perspective, if they would be approved, blocked, or would need review. Okay. So the first one is a politician launching a meme coin.
That's a good one.
I don't live in the US.
I don't know.
I'm
Free
so
market
sorry.
economics, Nikhil. But yes, I agree, blocked. And they were recently blocked from trading on prediction markets. No.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that
Congress are not
either.
allowed to trade on prediction markets. At least
No.
not for markets that are related to politics, I'm pretty sure.
What about the president and his family?
Seems like it
Blocked.
might be a conflict of interest, so I would say blocked as well.
Fair enough. I mean, I don't live in the US, so I can say anything. Okay. A trading agent opening wallets on 14 different chains to trade.
Gotta do what you gotta do. That's fine.
Seems fun.
Yeah.
Okay. A founder saying decentralized protocol while manually pausing contracts at 2 a.m.
Why are they pausing the contract?
I think
For
first
whatever reason.
review.
Yeah, that would be a needs review. I agree.
Okay. Sounds good. A $1 billion protocol with customer support only run through Telegram.
So every protocol? I mean, nothing wrong with that. I would say that's approved.
Review or approved. I think it sort of depends, but I don't know. Like we have one right now where we had to do we're like, oh, like one of our customers will likely be paying in their native asset. We just need to kind of manage treasury. It's our normal service provider agreement. And we were talking to one of the groups that runs a brokerage, and it's a large reputable group, and they're like, oh, we'll create a Telegram group. And I was like, what do you mean a Telegram group? Like, shouldn't we use a Slack group at the least here? Like, we have a Slack channel as well. Like, I don't know.
I only accept pigeon mail, honestly. If you need something done, send me a pigeon.
I'll remember that. So when I'm done editing the podcast, I'll send
Yeah, you
you
can
the.
send it to me in a flash drive with a pigeon.
Sounds good. All right. A meme coin whale trying to pass off as an accredited investor.
they could be an accredited investor, you know? I would say as long as they are an accredited investor, that's fine. So probably needs review or approved.
Needs review, right? Because they have to submit whatever thing to whoever saying that they're accredited. But if it's on Twitter, that's a race to the bottom. It doesn't really matter, right? So
Okay. A hedge fund farming an airdrop using 40 interns.
approved.
Approved. Not efficient. They should probably do a better job, but there's nothing wrong with that.
I mean,
Okay.
it's not different from how an investment bank or a traditional hedge fund. It's not so different from how a traditional hedge fund or a bank operates. So that seems fine.
Okay. I think it's not that bad then, I think. Okay, a user trying to KYC from a yacht in international waters using Starlink.
Approved.
Yeah, that should be fine. It's usually like for KYC, it's usually where you are from, and then sometimes where you are currently located is a part of that. So you could add it to needs review, but you would probably only review it if the actual user was concerning or had a flag.
Yeah, because oftentimes you need to just approve where they're actually domiciled. So if they're traveling or something, it's usually fine.
What if they live on the yacht?
I mean, again, that's generally fine. That's actually fine, right? Because they're actually not from Iran or North Korea. So actually, it's better than if they're from one of those.
Because international waters is still fine. And as long as their original jurisdiction and where they are, like their residences is safe, then it's fine.
Okay. And the last one is a crypto casino trying to onboard themselves as an entertainment platform.
That I wouldn't know because I mean, if they are a casino, they could be considered an entertainment platform, but it depends on whether it's being regulated at the state level or the federal level. That's what really determines this. So very much a needs review case.
Okay. All right. So I think there weren't that many that were blocked except for the president and the politician one.
Clear conflicts of interest, maybe we block those. Other than that, I mean, it's all about whether it's meeting the organization's requirements or not.
Makes sense. And the last question that I have for both of you is what are some things that you're excited for in 2026, 2027 when it comes to crypto?
Nikhil, do you want to start? I had to think.
What I'm excited about in crypto for 2026 and 2027, one is I think on stablecoins. Like I think that is one of the places that really does have product market fit, and so I think you're going to have the proliferation of many more stablecoins, many different organizations launching their own stablecoin. Part of that is why we also released an asset compliance product. So I think that's one that I'm particularly excited about. And I think the other part then that directly segues into is really how do you build more kind of on-chain financial products that provide like vault type of systems, but that actually provide user like yield, right? Whether that's from tokenized treasuries or other types of sources. And I think you'll have a real financial product that operates a lot like a neobank, right? And I think that's very cool because it takes advantage of the programmability of blockchains. The last one would be securities, but I actually think securities is going to be more of a 2028 type of thing rather than this year or early next year.
Okay.
Everything of interest. All I'm left with is NFTs.
You still have to go first, so.
Are you bullish on NFTs?
I would say no. No explanation needed. Just a no for me. I honestly never had my NFT trading era, so I've always been a little out of the loop for that. But Nikhil kind of touched on this. I'm really big on neobanks. I think they're a really cool concept, especially in emerging markets. I think access to US dollar-based banking for countries that don't normally have that, or if they do have that, it's really expensive, really high rates. I think that's huge. And so it's kind of neobanks, kind of just like the globalization of financial infrastructure, right? Like right now, all the financial infrastructure that most people interact with is incredibly localized to their country, maybe even their state, maybe even their county. And so the idea of this becoming globalized and neobanks giving access to people who didn't have that access before, I think that's huge and amazing. And that paired with new access to technology and information with AI, I think emerging markets could do really, really well as a result of that. So that's a really exciting idea for me.
No, absolutely. I think it's huge. And just because I spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia and I see how many unbanked people there are, or how many, it's so complicated to get access to a US-based bank. So to have that accessibility, I think is huge and actually is the ethos of crypto, which is democratization of financial assets. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, and I'm quite excited to see how it evolves, how it grows, and where there's most amount of adoption from. Yeah, those were all the questions that I had for you guys. Thank you so much for coming on today. It was great to have.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to Off the Record. If you like this episode, like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps the podcast grow. You can find more episodes wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.